Hello, Tommy Burns here again. Welcome back to my EC Vault. Today I wanted to share a few multi-signed items that have a bit of history to them. So I'd like to start with probably the rarest item in my collection. This is Weird Science number 18, and it's not in great shape as you can see, but it is very important. So this item was signed for the 1953 Fan-Addict convention. There was a guy named James Taurasi who had a fanzine called Fantasy Times. It was a science fiction literature fanzine, and then he started a fanzine called Fantasy Comics, dedicated to comic books, and he was a big fan of EC's Weird Science and Weird Fantasy. And he put on a convention for the Fan-Vets Association, which he started to provide science fiction literature to veterans serving overseas, and very worthy cause. Bill Gaines was aware of it and offered to participate. So you can almost say that the 1953 Fan-Vet Convention was the first EC convention, because a few of the artists associated with this issue and Bill Gaines and Al Feldstein participated, and as a raffle prize there were 15 signed copies of Weird Science number 18 offered. And this is signed uniquely 2 times by Ray Bradbury, once on the cover, and then again inside on the first splash page, which is also signed at the bottom by Bill Gaines, Al Feldstein, and Wallace Wood, signing as Woody. This comic was also signed by all of the artists that worked on it. So there you've got Al Williamson, Jack Kamen, and Joe Orlando. This is, as far as I am aware, the most multi-signed EC comic book to date back to the 50s. Of course, I've got a lot of comics in my collection, as a lot of fan addicts do, that have been signed by one or a few of the EC artists later at comic conventions and things, but these signatures all date to 1953. There were originally 15 copies of this signed Weird Science 18. 4 are currently known to exist. 2 are in Al Feldstein and Bill Gaines' bound volumes of Weird Science. 1 is in the collection of EC historian Roger Hill, and the 4th one you see right here. Speaking of Roger Hill, if you want to know more about this unique signed Weird Science, in his EC Fan-Addict fanzine number 1, he did an article called The Rarest EC of Them All. And as you can see, there's a copious amount of research here into this signed Weird Science 18. Roger actually got some photos from the convention of the EC creators on a panel there, and I highly recommend you seeking out a copy of EC Fan-Addict fanzine number 1 if you want to know more about this historic copy of Weird Science. Next, we're going to move on to an item that was not offered as a signed item. This is the EC Lives EC Fan-Addict Convention book from 1972, but there are many, many copies out there that are multi-signed by the EC staff, because this was the biggest gathering of EC alumni in history, and a lot of people got their program books signed. I've seen a lot of examples with really great sketches, too, by some of the EC artists. This particular copy is from the collection of underground comics artist Jack Jackson, and he got his copy signed by Bill Gaines, Harvey Kurtzman, Will Elder down there under his portrait. And these portraits, by the way, were drawn for the 1952 EC Christmas Party by Marie Severin. Jack Davis signed for Jackson there. George Evans. Marie Severin. Al Williamson. Reed Crandall. And Reed is one of the tougher EC signatures to get, so I was very happy to have this. fellow EC historians might say, hey, Reed Crandall wasn't at the Fan-Addict Con, and you'd be right. But Jack Jackson, there's some pretty famous pictures of him at Al Williamson's place with Reed Crandall as a visitor. He got multiple items signed by Reed, including his EC portfolios. And I've got some friends who have signed EC portfolios from Jack Jackson's collection with Reed's signature. So I was very excited to get this. So this is, by the way, my only Reed Crandall signature. And last but far from least, you've got Wallace Wood there. And you might have noticed in that weird Science 18, he signed Woody, which was his preferred nickname. I've also got signatures from him signed Wallace Wood, and here he has signed Wally Wood, which is obviously his more commercially recognizable name. So there you've got EC Lives. It's not uncommon to find copies of this signed by multiples of the EC staff, so they're well worth looking out for. Going to try to make sure that my little Lulu here doesn't walk on any of my EC stuff. Be good, girl. So this now is the daddy of all signed EC items. And these are still fairly available. It was a limited edition of 500, but occasionally they come up on the collector's market. What this is a greatly expanded version of Fred von Bernowitz's historic EC checklist. There have been multiple editions of these over the years, and I'm going to cover some of those in another video sometime because I have every edition, but I want to focus on this one because Grant Geisman greatly expanded on Fred von Bernowitz's original work to produce this book, Tales of Terror, the EC Companion. It's signed by 16 of the EC creators. And I don't know of any other EC item that is signed by more of the staff than this. Hard to believe this is 20 years old now. And a lot of these folks, sadly, are no longer with us. But this is a great place to get what I believe is the most EC signatures in one place. Again, it was numbered to 500. As you can see, this is copy number 33. If you can find a copy of this, don't pass it up. They're well worth having. I want to give honorable mention to another book of Grant Geisman's here. This came out in 2005. It's called Foul Play. And Bud Plant Art Books offered the only signed edition. It was limited to 300. And I was very happy to get this because in addition to some of the EC creators that signed Tales of Terror, you've also got Nancy Gaines and her and Bill's daughters, Kathy Gaines and Wendy Gaines. This is the only official EC item I know of that is signed by the Gaines women like that. So there you have it. Some historical EC signed items. And I look forward to waxing rhapsodic about my favorite comics ever with you again. So thanks for watching. Cheers.